when last year I spent more money on spilt liquor in bars from...
He truly hated him more than anyone. The crowd never saw it. They only saw the robes, the diamonds, the swagger, the woo that shook every arena in America. They never saw the silence that came before the curtain opened. They never saw the moment he stood alone in the hallway, gripping the edge of his wrist tape, fighting the memories of the men who hurt him the most. Ric Flair lived his entire career under bright lights, but his anger was born in the dark. He carried that hatred through locker rooms, drenched in sweat and politics, through flights that landed with bruised ribs, through nights when he walked out smiling, while every step reminded him of someone who once tried to break him. Wrestling was not a performance to him. It was survival. And survival created enemies. Real enemies. There were nights he knew the man across from him wanted to punish him. Nights when the hits came too stiff. Nights when the booking felt like betrayal. Nights when he heard a name whispered backstage and felt his jaw clench, because he knew exactly what that rivalry had cost him. Some men pushed him physically, others stripped him mentally. A few went after his pride. Only one broke him in ways he never forgot. People believe Ric Flair hated many wrestlers, but the truth is sharper. He hated only a few. 5 men stood above the rest. 5 rivals left marks that no championship could erase. 5 names he never said out loud. They shaped the scars he carried and the anger he protected. The list was never written, never spoken, never shared with anyone, not with friends, not with family, not with the business that built him and broke him in equal measure, but the truth lived inside him. And he carried it through every entrance ramp he ever walked. Before we move into the list, we need to remember who Ric Flair truly was. Ric Flair was not born into greatness. He was shaped by humiliation, pressure, and the brutality of a business that demanded more than talent. He entered wrestling young, loud, and unprepared for the cruelty waiting behind the locker room door. Veterans tested him. Promoters doubted him. Crowds mocked him. He learned fast that charisma alone would not save him. Pain would, resilience would, pride would. Then the plane crash came, the moment that bent his spine and almost ended everything. Doctors told him he would never wrestle again. He heard the words and felt something inside him harden. He walked back into the ring months later, not as a survivor, but as a man who understood that the world wanted him broken. That knowledge made him cold. It made him dangerous. It made him Ric Flair. He grew under pressure. Every feud carved a new line into him. Every betrayal sharpened him. He learned how to talk because he had been silenced. He learned how to fight because he had been punished. He learned how to manipulate because someone once manipulated him. The Nature Boy swagger was never a shield. It was a weapon, a warning, a reminder that he had crawled up from too much pain to ever bow again. Crowds saw the robes, the diamonds, the limousine riding. They never saw the cost. They never saw the nights when he bled in empty arenas. They never saw the phone calls that changed title plans minutes before showtime. They never saw the politics that stripped him of momentum when he needed it most. They never saw the rivals who smiled on camera and worked to crush him backstage. Ric Flair became a legend because he refused to fall. But legends are not built on glory, they are built on wounds. He carried many. Some healed, some never did. 5 of them were carved by men who left marks no spotlight could hide. 5 men shaped the scars he carried. Number 5, Dusty Rhodes. He was the rival that made him bleed. Dusty Rhodes did not look like the man who could break Ric Flair, but he did. Not through power, through pride, through the one weapon Flair never learned to control, the crowd. Their story began with a divide. Flair played the rich champion. Dusty carried the voice of the working man. It was a clash of worlds, a clash that turned into a war. Dusty mocked him on the mic, called him privileged, called him soft, called him everything Flair spent years fighting to prove wrong. The insult struck deeper than any chop. The violence came next. Matches that left both men shaking. Steel cages that swallowed sound. Nights when Flair felt the hits were too stiff. Nights when Dusty pushed him against the ropes and forced him to remember every weakness he tried to hide. Flair tried to crush him, tried to punish him, tried to strip Dusty of momentum. But every time Flair walked out of the ring, the crowd booed him louder. Every time Dusty spoke, the arena shook. Flair hated that sound. It hunted him. It mocked him. It betrayed the aura he built. Politics made it worse. Promoters saw money in Dusty. Fans demanded him. Flair heard the whispers. Dusty is the real hero. It stung. It broke something inside him. He felt himself losing ground before the bell even rang. Dusty was not just an opponent. He was a threat to everything Flair believed he owned. The humiliation came on a night Flair never forgot. Dusty pinned him clean. The arena exploded. Flair saw people crying, hugging, celebrating the fall of the Nature Boy. He lay on the mat, staring at the lights, knowing he had been exposed. Dusty took more than a win. He took a piece of Flair's pride. That wound stayed open. He carried that moment for the rest of his life. Number 4. Ricky Steamboat. He punished him in ways the crowd never understood. Ricky Steamboat was the rival who did not need mind games. He did not insult. He did not scheme. He broke Ric Flair with something far worse. Pure skill. Pure stamina. Pure perfection that dragged Flair into matches he was never ready to survive. Their story began simple. Two men pushed into a feud because the business demanded excellence. But Steamboat brought something Flair hated. Purity. Honor. A clean style that made Flair's tricks look cheap. Flair despised that contrast. It stripped away his advantage. It mocked his identity. It reminded him that some fights could not be won with charisma. Then the real pain began. Long matches, endless reversals, exhaustion that clawed into Flair's lungs. Steamboat moved without effort. Flair felt like he was drowning. Every chop echoed harder. Every fall hit colder. The crowd sided with Steamboat. Loud. Relentless. Even when Flair landed something brutal, the arena called for more from Steamboat. Flair hated that sound. It crushed him. It hunted him. The violence stayed within the ropes, but it drained Flair deeper than any stiff shot backstage ever had. Steamboat took him into 30-minute classics, 40-minute wars. Flair walked out smiling for the camera, but staggered back into the locker room with his chest bruised and his pride stripped raw. Steamboat dragged him into a level he could not escape. Flair felt exposed. He felt controlled. He felt like Steamboat was rewriting the match while Flair was fighting to breathe. The humiliation came when Steamboat lifted the championship. Flair stood there watching the man he could not outlast. The man who carried the crowd like a wave. The man who proved that Flair's best might not be enough. It was not just a loss. It was a reminder. Skill had beaten swagger. Purity had beaten manipulation. Flair hated that truth more than he ever admitted. He carried that moment for the rest of his life. Number 3. Harley Race. He hurt him in ways no one else did. Harley Race was not a rival. He was a test. A gatekeeper who believed Ric Flair did not deserve the throne he chased. Race looked at Flair and saw flash, ego, noise, none of the grit he valued. And Flair felt that judgment every time they stood across from each other. Their story began with doubt. Race did not think Flair was worthy of carrying the business. He said it. He showed it. He pushed Flair in locker rooms filled with silence. He pushed him in matches that went longer and harder than Flair expected. Flair wanted acceptance. Race gave him punishment. The kind that stripped confidence. The kind that broke pride. Then the violence came. Not wild violence. Controlled. Measured. Race hit with purpose. He hit to test. He hit to expose. Flair remembered matches where every slam felt like a message. He remembered nights when Race dragged him through pain and waited to see if he could stand back up. The crowd cheered Flair, but Race did not care. He worked stiff. He worked heavy. Flair felt crushed under the weight of a man who fought like the business belonged only to him. Politics made it worse. Race held influence. Flair heard the whispers, heard veterans say he would never be Race, never be as tough, never be as real. Race let those words spread. Flair hated him for it. He hated the shadow Race cast. He hated how Race forced him to fight, not just for titles, but for legitimacy. An invisible war that drained him every night. The humiliation came when Race beat him down in front of a crowd that expected Flair to rise faster. Flair lay on the mat, chest, burning ribs tight, watching Race stand over him with the calm of a man who believed he had proven something. Flair felt small. He felt exposed. He felt the business tilt against him. That moment stayed. It carved a scar deep, and he never forgave him. Number 2, Sting. He attacked what Ric Flair valued most. Sting was the one man who took Flair's legacy and bent it into something new. He was the golden face of a company that once belonged entirely to Flair, and Flair felt that shift like a blade. Sting did not just rise, he rose at Flair's expense. Their story began different from the others. It started with respect, mentor and student, veteran and rookie. Flair saw talent in him, fire, charisma, a future that shined too bright. But that brightness became a threat. Promoters loved Sting. Fans worshipped him. Flair watched a new era forming and felt the ground move under his boots. He hated that feeling. Then came the violence. Sting hit hard, explosive power, speed Flair could not match. Every match with him felt like punishment. Flair tried to slow him, tried to drag him into deep water, tried to crush the momentum. Nothing worked. Sting overpowered him. outran him, jumped over him. The crowd roared every time Sting stood tall. Flair felt hunted. He felt stripped of control. He felt the story shifting away from him. The worst pain came from the fans. They cheered Sting like a savior. They booed Flair like a relic. Flair heard it every night. He hated how loud it became. He hated losing the crowd to a man he once helped build. It felt like betrayal. It felt like the business choosing a new king while he was still alive. The humiliation hit on the night Sting beat him for the title. Flair lay on the mat staring up at a man he once guided, a man the company now called the Future. The arena exploded. Sting held the belt high. Flair felt the world turn. That was the passing of the torch, not a celebration, a burial. Flair saw his own era close right in front of him. He carried that moment for the rest of his life. Number 1. Hulk Hogan. He stripped away his pride. Hulk Hogan was the one rival Ric Flair could never escape. Not in the ring, not in the spotlight, not in the history books. Hogan was the storm that arrived just when Flair believed the world finally belonged to him. And the storm took everything. Their story began long before they ever touched in the ring. Two giants rising in two different worlds. Flair ruled the territories. Hogan ruled the national stage. Flair built his kingdom through grit and scars. Hogan built his through mass appeal. When Hogan entered Flair's orbit, the balance shifted. The cameras followed him. The fans followed him. The business followed him. Flair felt the spotlight move from his shoulders to Hogan's hands, and the anger never left. Then came the violence. Hogan hit with weight, not precision, not finesse, pure force. Flair tried to outlast him, tried to outthink him, tried to pull him into deep matches where psychology mattered. Hogan broke the rhythm every time. He crushed through the storytelling Flair mastered. He punished Flair with simple power that drowned out everything else, and the crowd loved it. They cheered Hogan louder than anyone Flair ever faced. Each roar hunted him. Each chant mocked him. Backstage politics made it worse. Hogan carried influence that bent entire locker rooms. Decisions changed because he walked into a building. Title plans shifted. Matches were rewritten. Flair felt himself losing the power he fought decades to earn. He hated it. He hated how fast the momentum vanished. He hated how promoters favored Hogan's draw over Flair's legacy. He hated watching the business tilt toward a man who did not live the same scars. The humiliation came on national television. Hogan beat Flair clean in front of millions. Flair stood there, chest heaving, watching Hogan pose while the arena exploded. That moment cut deeper than any chop. It was the night the Nature Boy felt himself replaced, overshadowed, outshined, everything he built swallowed by one man's spotlight. Flair never forgot that, and he never forgave him. Ric Flair did not walk through his career untouched. He walked through it bruised, hunted, and betrayed. Every rivalry cut him. Every feud left a mark. 5 men carved scars deep enough to shape the man he became. Dusty Rhodes challenged his pride. Ricky Steamboat exposed his limits. Harley Race tested his existence. Sting replaced his era. Hulk Hogan overshadowed his kingdom. Each one took something. Each one forced him to survive a different kind of pain. Flair learned early that wrestling was not built on glory. It was built on pressure. On nights when the crowd chose someone else. On matches that stripped confidence. On politics that crushed momentum. People celebrated the robes, the diamonds, the swagger. They never saw the cost behind it. They never saw the phone calls that changed everything hours before showtime. They never saw the bruises under the robe. They never saw the silence after a loss he was not supposed to take. The hatred he carried was not petty. It was the byproduct of living at the top while everyone tried to break him. It was the memory of insults that stung deeper than punches. It was the echo of crowds cheering for the men who pushed him further than he ever wanted to go. It was a lifetime of fighting to keep his place in a business that replaced kings without warning. But he survived. That was his true legacy. Not the titles, not the promos, not the celebrations. Survival. He stood longer than many expected. He endured more than most understood. And even with every scar, he walked through each curtain like the world still belonged to him. In the end, in WWE, the good guys do not win. They survive.